Hello everyone, welcome to Palaehome ECR online talk series, and this is me Prachi, and we have with us Razika here. Razika? Yeah, so you are on mute. Okay, so Razika is here with us. So as usual, I will give you all just a brief about what is Palaehome. So Palaehome is now, by this time, all of you know that it's a project where we are looking forward to bringing together the experts who are, working in India, Africa, Arabia, and Southwest East Asia, where we will try to address the issues related to chronology, palaeoenvironments, and behavioral variability over the Lower Paleolithic. And we are also trying to explore the similarities as well as, differences in evolutionary trajectories. As a part of the same project, we are organizing this online series which is mainly for the early career researchers who are working, on these various aspects of the Lower Paleolithic. Through this series, we are mainly aiming to create a network, between the ECRs and with maybe some future collaboration or maybe some greater opportunities where we can discuss each other's work. Okay, so with this, now I will hand over all of you to Razika, who will introduce you to our today's speaker, Razika.
Hi everyone, welcome to, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, welcome to our discussion, with Dr. Jayendra Joglekar. Sorry for the pronunciation if I did mistakes. Our speaker is currently working as an assistant professor in the Department of IAHC and Archaeology at Indira Gandhi National Tribal University. He completed his MA in Ancient Indian History, Cultural and Archaeology from Deccan College Postgraduate and Research University in Pune in India. Followed also by postgraduate diploma in archaeology from Institute of Archaeology, Archaeological Survey of India, New Delhi, and his PhD in archaeology with UGC from Deccan College Postgraduate and Research University, Pune also. He was affiliated with Deccan College, Pune for postdoctoral research. He is also working as Assistant Secretary of the Indian Society for Prehistoric and Quaternary Studies, Pune and also Assistant Editor of UGC card listed journal Man and Environment. He has received 2 awards from prestigious societies, namely Indian Society for Prehistoric and Quaternary Studies in Pune, also in India, Sankalia Young Archaeologist Awards, and the Indian Archaeological Society from New Delhi. Also, he is also member of 4 professional bodies. He has received Emphasis Foundation Fellowship during 2022 at Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute in Pune, in India. His specialization in the field of prehistoric archaeology. He has been part of field exploration in the states of Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, sorry for the pronunciation, and again, he also has authored 50 research articles in reputed UGC listed journal and proceeding editing books also, and co-edited 2 books and presented over 30 papers in national and international conferences. I think without too much delay, we can let our guest start his conference.
Yeah, over to you, Jayendra. You can start sharing the screen.
Yeah, thank you, Prachi and Razika, for inviting me for this Palaehome talk and allowing me to present my research, which is actually not my research as such. It is a teamwork. So I'm just presenting it on behalf of all of us who have worked in this region. So I'll not waste any time, and I'll start the presentation. So I'll start talking about this Acheulian culture in the Upland Deccan. So I need not discuss about what is Acheulian culture and how it is well spread in all like in old world, in Europe, Africa, and Asia. We have Acheulian record from all these three old world continents, and we have well dated sites going up to 1.8 million years ago. And similarly, in India, we have now sites like INQUA-HABCOM and Isampur, which are fairly dated beyond 1 million years. So, not going into much details about this, what is Acheulian culture and how it is spread, directly coming into the Upland Deccan, which is an important region in India. Why it is important region? Because it is broadly surrounded by the older rock formations and like quartzites and sandstones all around. So Upland Deccan is an area in the peninsular India, which has been surrounded by Vindhyas in the north and Kalahris in the south. And we have also limestonic formations in the Bhima Basin. So this region, Upland Deccan, is basically a basaltic terrain, Deccan volcanic rocks. So now I'll just start. So how the Paleolithic studies in India began, everyone knows about its history. So Robert Bruce Wood was the person who discovered first Paleolithic artifacts near Pallavaram near Chennai in Tamil Nadu. So from that, the Paleolithic journey of India started, and everyone knows that most of the sites were discovered by him in his during work in 1980, 1860s and beyond. So these are the two regions in Indian context where he particularly worked a lot and discovered lots of Paleolithic sites, Neolithic sites, and megalithic sites, and beyond that. So he worked like more than 500 sites he reported from these two areas. So these two areas basically are where quartzites and other formations are there. And the area where my mouse is currently there, which is the area which we have worked, or I have worked morely, that is the basaltic region. So just giving a background about this current research. So what is the background for this? That first discovery by Robert Bruce Wood in 1863, and later on from 1863 onwards till about 1940s, which is around 80 years of time, in which lots of scholars in their own capacity, lots of missions from Europe, like Cambridge mission, and Anthropological Survey of India, Archaeological Survey of India, Geological Survey of India, various universities, institutes, they worked in different parts of India, discovering lots of Paleolithic sites, Lower Paleolithic, Middle Paleolithic sites in different parts of India. Surprisingly, the Upland Deccan region, where we have worked later on, the Deccan Trap region, the basaltic terrain, was surprisingly left untouched. And the reason given was that this region, the basaltic rock or basalt rock, is not suitable for making stone tools because its conchoidal fracture has problems and it weathers quite fast. It rapidly weathers and erodes quickly. So that was the reason given by various scholars and various institutes, and they slightly ignored this region. Only a few works were carried out in this region also, and some tools were reported on siliceous materials, so which is the fairly suitable raw material for making stone tools. But basalt stone tools were somehow missing the part of this Paleolithic discourse for more than 80 years. So what happened in 1940s was the discovery of a site at Gangawadi near Gangapur in Nashik district, which is a part of Godavari Basin, which is a major river in the peninsular India. So in this region, finally, some stone tools were found made on basalt, and these were reported by Professor H.D. Sankalia, confirmed by him that these are basically Lower Paleolithic Acheulian artifacts made on basalt, and it was reported in 1952. So this is how first discovery took place in basaltic terrain with basalt as a raw material used for making Acheulian tools. Later on, followed by this work, lots of works were carried out in sites such as Nevasa, Chirkion, Pravara, Bori, Morgaon were reported. So the river valleys, like larger river valleys, basins like Godavari, Pravara, and there are smaller basins like Kara, Kukudi, and which are part of the Bhima Basin, were very well studied, and lots of sites and some major sites were reported and they were studied over the period of time. So a brief background is this, and I will slightly also discuss about these sites in coming slides. So this is the region basically where we as a team and I personally also have worked in this region. So this region is totally covered by basalt formations, which it is also having Western Ghats, Sahyadris, and it has its pediments. Then we have autochthonous and allochthonous channels, rivers flowing to this region, cutting through the bedrock. The bedrock, ungraded bedrock channels are quite common in this region. The rivers have incised meanders cutting through the bedrock, that is basalt. And then the exposed colloidal alluvium deposits in this region rarely exceed 20 meters, which is a general phenomenon in this region. Lots of works over this region has confirmed that rarely we have deposits of over 20 meters in these river valleys. Then channel gravels basically are a mixture of older and younger deposits. Now this is an important feature which has to be kept in mind when I will discuss further my work and other research also. So this mixture of older and younger gravels is an important factor to understand the Paleolithic or Acheulian sites in this region. And then Paleolithic artifacts were often found in this region, Acheulian artifacts and Paleolithic artifacts, particularly in the cemented and loose gravels, and also in some other contexts also. So the cemented gravels and loose gravels are the basic common context from where Acheulian or Paleolithic artifacts are being reported. So what is the issues related to basalt and Paleolithic upland? Somehow I have discussed it. I'll discuss it further. So first was Robert Brucewood, who suggested that this raw material was unsuitable for making artifacts, and somehow this region must have been avoided by the early hominids. Later on, but this hypothesis of Robert Brucewood continued for over 80, 90 years, but later discoveries starting from Gangapur, then Nevasa in Pravara Basin, and other sites in the Bhima Basin as well as Krishna Basin confirmed that this hypothesis is partially incorrect because that region was not actually much surveyed before during Brucewood time and even later times also. So starting from 1940s, 50s, lots of surveys were carried out, and then lots of sites were discovered. So this hypothesis of Foot was partially refuted. And then Dr. Sheila Mishra suggested that this early hominids certainly might have occupied this Deccan Trap region and made artifacts made on basalt, but the weathering index is high, slightly higher in basalt, and thus these artifacts might not have survived when they were exposed to the environment. They must have weathered away or eroded and crumbled up like that. So because of that, then these artifacts might have not survived in larger scales. So other than that, it was also observed that dolerite, which is an formation within the basalt, dolerite dike, which has been used at some of the sites at Acheulian sites such as Bori and Nevasa, Lakshminala and Chirki, where dolerite dike has been also exploited by the early hominids. So basalt along with dolerite dike, and in certain cases we also have some artifacts made on siliceous materials also. So which is not very common, but at some sites we have artifacts made on siliceous material. So this was the scenario till 1980s. Then coming into 1980s only, then sites of Yedurwadi and Morgaon were particularly reported from Upper Krishna Basin and Kara Basin. And then these sites totally don't have dolerite dike material. So certainly these sites only have artifacts made on basalt, while Yedurwadi also has one artifact made on quartzite. Now this quartzite was brought from some distance away. So basically these regions are semi-arid regions, and it was suggested that these semi-arid regions were preferred by the early hominids. Later on, Professor Corisetter suggested a Purana Basin model, and he suggested that this upland Deccan region, Deccan Trap region, might have occupied by the early hominids, but this must have been a peripheral area, that as this region does not have density of the sites which is there in other parts of India, such as in Vindhyan Basin or like Hunzgi Bajbai Valley, where lots of sites, localities were found in smaller areas and dense occupation was there. Such was not the case in the upland Deccan or Deccan upland region in the basaltic terrain. So he suggested that this can be called as a peripheral area for Paleolithic occupation as far as Acheulian is concerned. So now again, this confirming the Acheulian scenario in the upland Deccan, the important sites are Gangapur, Nevasa, Chirkion, Pravara, Morgaon, Bori, Yedurwadi in different river valleys such as Godavari, Bhima, and Krishna. Majority of these sites are either in semi-primary context, cemented gravel context, and loose gravel context. These are basically large flake-based Acheulian tradition that is mostly artifacts. Like finished tools are mostly made on 10 centimeter, more than 10 centimeter large flakes. And then basalt is the most preferred raw material in all these sites, where dolerite dike has also been used in certain sites. Now, some of the sites have been dated, and there are some controversies related to these dates. But leaving apart the controversies, certainly on the basis of the artifacts, the assemblages, and their geomorphic context, we can certainly say that some sites could be of the late early Pleistocene, and certainly other sites belong to the middle Pleistocene time period. And then middle Paleolithic, particularly in these all the sites mentioned above, all these sites rarely have any middle Paleolithic artifacts from these sites coming up. So this suggests that these artifacts made on basalt or dolerite, middle Paleolithic artifacts, are rare, particularly in these well-known Acheulian sites. So what this suggests is that there is a lack of technological and occupational continuity in the same areas where Acheulian sites were quite rich in this region. So like we have sites of Atirampakam and sites of Bhimbetka, where we have continuity from Acheulian to Middle Paleolithic. But these region in the basaltic terrain, for now, we can say that these same areas where Acheulian hominins or early hominins occupied the area where with adapting with Acheulian technology did not continue during the Middle Paleolithic technology. So this is probably the scenario at present. So this might change in the future if some works are carried out further. So this is the area where now this one is basically Gangapur in the Godavari basin. Two is basically Nevasa Lakshminala. Three is Chirkion Parora. Four is this Bori. Five is the site of Morgaon. Six is the site of Yedurwadi. Now this first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are basically earlier known and worked sites. 7 is the area where I worked during my PhD doctoral research from 2014 to 19. That is the Upper Krishna Basin. And 8 is the Upper Sina Valley, which I recently, like 2 years ago, worked on this Infosys Foundation project for Brahma Bhandarkar Institute. So these two, 7 and 8, I'll talk much in detail further. So just going through the earlier known sites, I'll skip through these slides very quickly. That is the site of Gangapur, just to give a glimpse how these sites look. This is the site of Gangapur, a well-known site, well-studied sites from 1950s, 60s onwards. Until 2018, work has been carried out in this region. The composite sections have been drawn. And it has been known that this site is particularly of Middle Pleistocene time period. And the major artifact is cleaver, which major finished artifact coming from this site is cleavers. So cleavers are quite dominating the assemblage in this Gangapur. Now, next site is the site of Lakshminala Nevasa, which has been worked from Sankalya's time in 1950s and going up to in 2020, like 18 till 2018, some reinvestigations have been carried out in this region. So again, this artifacts coming from this lower cemented gravel, and this cemented gravel is basically has a cement of calcrete, which has been dated by Thorium method going beyond 350,000 years. Now, again, there has been debate about this dating method and how this date can be suitable or unsuitable, but we can certainly say, looking at the context and stratigraphy, that these artifacts certainly belong at least to the Middle Pleistocene, if not older. So this again, this Lakshminala Nevasa site is very important. Now, these artifacts are fairly coming from the secondary context, this gravel context, cemented gravel. Now, again, one of the important site was the Chirkion Praura, which has been worked by Dr. Gudrun Corvinus in 1960s, 70s, 80s. And two excellent monographs were published by her in 1981 and 83 about this lore, like the geomorphology and Acheulian from the Praura basin. So she excavated this site, and quite a rich collection was collected from this site. And this site again has been particularly suggested to be of early Pleistocene, late early Pleistocene, and lots of Acheulian artifacts made on basalt as well as dolerite dike have been reported from this site, and occupational floors also were identified from this region, and lots of funnel remains and wood remains also were collected from this site. So important, another site is site of Bori, which is important for tephra. Another site which has controversies, lots of debates about its dates, with dates coming up from 1.4 million and till going into 24,000. So these dates are more particularly confined to this tephra. So if we leave the tephra aside, only look at the Acheulian artifacts and the geomorphic context, you can certainly say that these artifacts are certainly fairly older, at least of Middle Pleistocene, because such artifacts we cannot find in late Pleistocene. We have no record of finding such artifacts in late Pleistocene. So on that case also, we can certainly say that this is at least Middle Pleistocene, could be even late early Pleistocene. and it has typical artifacts such as picks. Now, these artifacts at Bori were found in two contexts, like tephra is also capping these artifact bearing horizon, and at some points the tephra is also below the artifact bearing horizon. So that has created some issues, and this tephra, again, sampling issues are there. Also at this site, we have artifacts made on basalt and dolerite dike, and we also have some faunal remains fossils also. So again, it is important because we have in this site smaller flakes also, which are certainly of importance, that suggesting that this snapping process took in place in situ, and these artifacts were preserved within this context, and they were not, as you can see, they are very sharp. So these were certainly not flown away or transported by some fluid agency. So this suggests that this was a semi-primary or near to primary site context. Now, another important site is the site of Morgaon, which is falling in the Kara Basin, which is part of broader Bhima Basin. And this was excavated from 2000 to 2007 by my guide of PhD, that is Professor Sushma Dev and Professor Sheila Mishra. Jointly they worked and they excavated the site from 2000 to 2007. And lots of work on this site again has been carried out on the basis of geomorphic context, artifacts. And again, at this site, tephra was reported. Also, paleomagnetic studies were carried out. And on that basis, now at this site, only artifacts are found below this tephra. So this tephra was again dated with various techniques. Some dates gave it of YTT, some gave dates of OTT. So again, that tephra dating is certainly a problem which me as an archaeologist certainly cannot solve it. Just on the basis of archaeology and what the artifact context is there and stratigraphy, we can say that this again site is very old. With earliest deposit with Acheulian bearing has some lateritic deposit, which is certainly a feature of suggesting that this is an older deposit, like of at least late early Pleistocene or early middle Pleistocene time period. So again, this has again important Acheulian artifacts such as large flakes, Combeva cores and Combeva flakes, and you can see a large cutting tools or cleavers. Particularly, very limited secondary flaking is there on this basalt. Particularly, we can have artifacts with limited secondary flaking. So unifacial artifacts again is a quite common feature, particularly at Morgaon. And this it is important to understand that similar type of artifacts I could find most of them in unifacial context from this Upper Krishna Basin, which I'll talk about now. Another important site which was in the Upper Krishna Basin was Yedurwadi. Now, this Yedurwadi site basically gave a clue that in the Upper Krishna Basin also we can find sites of artifacts made on basalt. So this site was reported by Dr. Kaya and his team in 1986. Again, this site has given evidence of Acheulian artifacts along with some fossils and some fossilized tree trunks. And this site, again, this thorium uranium method was applied for dating the calcrete. Now, this calcrete is a cementing layer, and artifacts are not basically were deposited that time when the calcrete was forming. So calcrete formation could be a possible, making that it is a later stage. So artifacts could be older than this calcrete formation. Now this calcrete formation was reported of going beyond 350,000. So artifacts could be also around same time or beyond that. So could be older than that. So again, this site also has given evidence of these small flakes, suggesting that these small flakes also are slightly fresh, and suggesting that this again could be an area where napping might have been to place somewhere near to this site of Yedurwadi. Also have hand axes and cleavers, quite common in this Yedurwadi assemblage. Now, what are the general issues in the Upland Deccan region? So general issues are basically why limited artifacts have been reported from limited sites is the difficulty of identification of artifacts made on basalt. And this could be the reason why earlier these sites in greater density were not found in this region. So sites, artifacts in abraded context, buried context, and non-diagnostic artifacts and rolled artifacts could be a problem to identify in this basaltic terrain, where the gravels, natural rocks are also basalt, artifacts are also made on basalt. And when they have a pattern also similar to the non-natural rocks, so it becomes a very difficult problem to identify the artifacts. And then surveys also becomes difficult in this terrain. Then absence of older sediments such as early or middle Pleistocene sediments have been reported from these regions. Like while I talk about the Upper Krishna Basin, I'll show how these older sediments were somehow missing, or they were only found in some limited patches. So that is one of the reasons we only have late Pleistocene sediments. Then we will rarely have Acheulian or Lower Paleolithic tools. So another issue was basically somehow biased surveys or prejudice, like keeping in mind that there might not be any sites in this region and we will not go and do surveys. So this was somehow the point of view that let's just not go there. Let's just not go there. So this kind of attitude probably might have led to limited identification of artifacts and sites in this region and limited new surveys and the investigation, because this region is slightly difficult to study, slightly difficult to carry out dating methods, and only we can carry out is the surveys, identify more and more sites, and try to identify hominin behavior and geomorphic features, and on that basis try to reconstruct the past, the paleo environment and hominin behavior. It is very difficult to get dates, particularly absolute dates from this region. There are lots of problems and issues related to this basaltic terrain. So that is a problem why many scholars try to avoid studying in this region and carrying out surveys in this region. So that could be a reason why this area was somehow less studied comparatively as far as dates are concerned. And then change perspective over the time. Now Acheulian and Lower Paleolithic, we have lots of grown understanding about this from globally, not only in Indian context. Globally, we have lots of greater understanding about this Lower Paleolithic and even other Paleolithic situations and how this continuity or change happen over time. So this again helped or it should be kept in mind while carrying out our surveys in this upland Deccan region. Also, various models and environmental and raw material determinism factors have also been considered previously, and those have to be kept in mind while carrying out work in this research in this upland Deccan. So these were the factors, and it has to be understood that each region, like upland Deccan, has some specific issues. Other regions have some specific issues. So when we acknowledge these issues and work accordingly, such work can be carried out in this region also. So now, what were the basic research goals to be carried out in the Upper Krishna Basin and Upper Sina Valley? Was to basically survey lesser studies river parts of the river basins, try to identify Acheulian or Lower Paleolithic localities, understand the nature of assemblages if there are there, and what is the raw material used. Then these certainly sites could be in disturbed context, as we have track record of such sites in this region. Channel gravels are important source to understand the basically secondary sites. Then this upper Krishna basin is basically a part of subhumid terrain, the upper part of this Krishna river. And then semi-arid terrain is this upper Sina valley. And looking into both these landscapes and how early hominins might have adapted to these landscapes and what could be the paleo environments. So these were some of the research goals, and to understand new areas for research, opening up new areas for research. So now coming in the upper Krishna basin part, so just the yellow stuff is important, that from 1950s onwards, 1950s the decade, S.C. Malik reported a few microlithic sites between Y and Mauli, which is the upper part of this Krishna river. Only microliths were reported from this region. For the work of Dr. R.S. Bapu's PhD, he could identify only 7 artifacts. Probably he could suggest flakes, scrapers, and cores, suggesting that these were lower Paleolithic artifacts made on basalt, and he suggested that this were just a passing artifacts, and that was a sporadic occupation made by early hominins in this region. Professor Rajguru, during his PhD research, suggested that this upper part of the Krishna river rarely has preserved some pre-late Pleistocene sediments. So he suggested that only late Pleistocene sediments have been preserved in this region, and thus Acheulian artifacts could be impossible to identify in this region. So they might have been not there. And then again, Gudrun Corvinus and her team suggested that late Pleistocene age for these alluvial deposits, and they carried out some C14 dates at Dhom, Dam, and Asli. In 1997, Joshi and Kale also suggested that the calcite formation in this region is particularly of late Pleistocene time period of 75 K. They applied again this uranium thorium method, and they suggested that mostly these deposits are of late Pleistocene. Again, in 2008, an attempt was made to understand the sediments, particularly quaternary sediments in this region, and reinvestigations were again carried out in this Y, basically Satara district area, to understand if there are some Paleolithic sites or some lower Paleolithic sites in this region. But most of this work again suggested that there was a rare activity of early hominins in this region, and only a few flakes were collected from Pachwad, and which was earlier reported by Dr. R.S. Papu. So this was the background for this Upper Krishna Basin, how previous studies were there. Now, important forward by Professor S.D. Sankalia to book of Dr. R.S. Papu, Pleistocene Studies in the Upper Krishna Basin. So these are important points given in this forward, that there is no evidence of early hominins in the upper reaches of Krishna. Heavier rainfall in the upper reaches than middle and lower reaches could be one of the reasons why upper reaches were avoided by the early hominins. Then quartzite, sandstone, and trap type is absent in the upper reaches, so only basalt is available. That could be one of the reasons why early hominins might have avoided this region. This was suggested by Professor S.D. Sankalia. Early man avoided the forested Mahabaleshwar Plateau and surrounding and also the foothills. So this was his conclusion through R.S. Papu's work. And on the contrary, Kalabdi regions where Ghataprabha and Malaprabha rivers flow, which are tributaries of the Krishna, particularly the Bagalkot area, has given ample evidence of Stone Age cultural remains. Basically, this region is of quartzite. And this work partially confirmed Foot's hypothesis. That's what Professor Sankalia and Dr. R.S. Papu's work suggested in 1970s. So this was the scenario till 2011. You can see only Password and Nisare. These are basically two sites which are important, which were previously reported, and this Yadurwadi, which has been talked about previously. So you can see only two sites were there, which was of importance previously. From 2014 to 19, I could carry out surveys in this region, and you can see lots of sites coming up in this region. And this is the work which was carried out between 2014 to 19 for my PhD, and lots of Acheulian localities were coming up. So I'll not discuss each and every locality. I'll just go through the context of these localities. So these are the basically geological formations. I just skip through this, not important because all the region is basically basalt. Only there are slight variations in the basaltic formation. So this, you can see all the sites are basically in this basaltic terrain. So what are basic context for Acheulian artifacts coming up from this upper Krishna basin? So this is one of the common context, that is the channel gravel, loose channel gravel. Now these such gravel bars are quite common in lots of river valleys in this upper Krishna basin. One of the important was this Ormodi river, which has given good evidence of Acheulian artifacts coming up from these loose gravels. So these reworked gravels are there, and Acheulian artifacts such as these are lying within this loose gravels. So another context is this Brescio conglomerate. Now this conglomerate has been observed only at limited sites or only 2 or 3 localities. And from that, we can find some Acheulian artifacts coming out from this Brescio conglomerate. Now this conglomerate is basically consisting of basalt, and sometimes we have also some siliceous materials and laterite materials. And Acheulian artifacts are basically embedded within this cemented conglomerate, Brescio conglomerate. And these basically, when these cemented conglomerates are getting eroded, these artifacts will wash out and eventually lie in the loose gravel. Another important basically context is this cobbly rubble gravel context. Now this cobbly rubble gravel is an like you can say near to primary, semi-primary context, because this is not a washed out material. This is basically the material which is lying over the bedrock and now falling down or getting dislodged from the original context and now coming into the channel. So basically these kind of contexts are very important to understand the original context of Paleolithic Acheulian artifacts from this above capping the bedrock. And this context is not very common, which has been observed only at the site of Atitu, and other sites are basically secondary channel context sites. Another important context is at the site of Nisre, where this older gravel in the river of Koina was observed previously, and Acheulian artifacts were collected from this older gravel, high level gravel. Now this gravel is basically an older deposit of Koina. Now the river Koina doesn't flow over at this height. It basically this recent silty clay and this bedrock till this level only this Koina river flows. Another important site context is the cemented gravel context. Now this has been observed at the site of Medauli, from where Acheulian artifacts are getting eroded from the cemented gravel context. So Acheulian artifacts are basically within this lower horizon of the cemented gravel, and these cemented gravel has been eroded over the time by Krishna river, and these artifacts are flown down into the channel. So this is a quite common context at Medauli, and this gave a clue that original context of the sites could be the cemented gravel or this cobbly rubble gravel. So only these two contexts are important, and the channel gravel context is a secondary context, river gravel context, and that gives a clue that these are fairly disturbed sites in this region, but there are sites. So again, this just to show a schematic diagram of showing how these sites were found in this upper Krishna basin, and to show that Acheulian artifacts are basically coming out from this lower horizon of the gravel, and this upper deposit, capping deposit, is basically this late Pleistocene deposit, and lowermost horizon sometimes lacks laterite, which is a very surprising scenario, and more work has to be carried out regarding this absence of laterite in this lower conglomerate. So more Acheulian artifacts are there, but why this gravel lateritic context is missing has to be worked more upon in this region. So this was the samples collected for my PhD study. That was at site of Mendovli. Acheulian artifacts in number 86 were collected. Baudan Nala produced 57 artifacts. Urmodi river sites, total 6 localities, collected about 175 artifacts, and other sites such as Pachwad, Nisre, Lim gave 8 artifacts. So this shows that quite a rich occupation was there. Although these is a secondary sites, and this is obviously a random sampling just to show that there are lots of possibilities which can be surveyed in this region. So why these artifacts might have been remained identified during previous work? So lots of previous work has been carried out in this region, but why Acheulian somehow was missing? So probable reasons could be these, that exfoliation and thermal fractures and angular debris somehow might have led that these are quite possible that artifacts are not there, but these geological phenomena are quite common. Then limited number of shaped or finished tools could be the reason that Acheulian artifacts might have, because in earlier previous trends in 1950s, 60s, only finished tools, only good looking or bifaces were collected. So the importance of flakes in large, like in the Acheulian context, was very limited. So that could be one of the reasons why Acheulian artifacts might have been missed in this region. Another important reason could have been the inability to understand or recognize the regional variability. So at this Upper Krishna Basin, there might have been some specific artifacts which were not commonly available in other parts of the areas, where that's why there was lack of experience to understand this regional variability. Then more work was carried out on quaternary geological sediments and rather than cultural remains. And also there was emphasis on understanding the historical past of this region rather than the prehistoric past. So during these surveys, what I could understand that if you look at these stones, you will think that these are only normal stones, which are quite common in this landscape, is channel gravel. So lots of stones, lakhs of crores of stones are there. But how to differentiate these from artifacts is by understanding these by if they are wet, and while drying, if you observe them, then you can understand their bulb of percussion or point of percussion, which is lying here. And when you understand this, then you can differentiate between natural rocks and artifacts, which is a difficult task in this looking in this basaltic terrain. So this method was again applied in the lab to understand certainly if we have collected really the artifacts or these are basically natural stones. So while also this method was applied, if the point of percussion is unclear or bulb is unclear when in this, especially in this rolled context, this method can be used. This is not a very difficult method, only just to wet and dry method, and you can understand the point of percussion from where this flake has been struck. So in this region, we also have observed lots of giant cores or large cores, not lots of, but we have observed them. So as you can see, there are giant cores in different forms, and from which large flakes might have been detached. Obviously, these were not collected, they were only seen in the field. So just to show a glimpse of artifacts, what kind of artifacts have been collected from this Upper Krishna Basin. Basically, lots of cleavers or cleaver flakes. Cleaver flakes has been particularly used because these are unifacial flakes, cleaver-like flakes. So they don't have much secondary flaking on them. So these kinds of cleaver-like flakes in different shapes and different forms have been observed from this Upper Krishna Basin, and they have been studied. Again, lots of cleavers have been collected from this Upper Krishna Basin. Large cutting tools are also quite common in this Upper Krishna Basin. All artifacts are basically made on compact vesicular basalt. Flakes are there, large flakes are there. And then napping features, which is a quite common phenomena, particularly in basalt also. We can see rounding and striations on the ventral surface. We have also irregular steps or surfaces on these artifacts. You have angular or profile or on ventral face, which are quite common features of hard rock napping. Different types of patina were observed on these artifacts, suggesting different preservation conditions and different sedimentary context. So these were also documented and reported and published. Broadly, what is Acheulian in the Upper Krishna Basin? Basically, locally available raw material, that is compact basalt, has been used. fine grain. Within this also slight differentiation has been made. Fine grained compact vesicular basalt is about 25%, which has been used. Medium grained has been used about 65%, and coarse grained about 10%. The assemblages are basically dominated by large flakes and large flake based more than 10 centimeter size flakes. A variety of techniques for detachment of such large flakes has been observed. Differential flaking with less flaking on ventral surface has been observed. Higher number of cleaver flakes is an important feature in this Upper Krishna Basin assemblages. Indexes and picks are very limited in number. This could be a regional adaptation strategy, might have been adopted. Small flakes, biface shaping or trimming flakes, which have been observed at the sites of Bori or Yedurwadi, and some in also in case of Morga, are fairly missing in this context. And this could be the reason of fluvial sorting. So it is not like these flakes were not there or not made or not found part of the assemblage, but these could not be found during the explorations because these might have been sorted fluvially and might have been transported previously or could have been also buried. But their number might have been less looking at the finished artifacts which have been collected. Flakes are largely without platform, and then their retouching is also almost as good as absent. Chopping tools are were not found during these collections, and discardal or prepared cores like such as Levala techniques has not been observed in these assemblages. Now, looking at this map, which was made by Richard Haldel in 2008. Now, this square part is the area where I have worked within the Upper Krishna Basin. Now, these all sites are basically this Kalabgi Basin area, where Dr. R.S. Pappu and then later on Professor Sushma, they worked in this region. This is the Kalabgi Basin part. And then this area where Professor Padaya has worked immensely in this region, reporting more than 200 localities in such a small area made on limestone rock. So this limestone area is very rich, and this Kalabgi Basin area is very rich. While this region only had these 3-4 dots, and these 3-4 dots also had given only a number of artifacts less than 10. So now basically this region also has given up slightly better evidence than earlier. Only 3 sites with 7 artifacts was the case earlier. Now we have more than 300 artifacts from coming up from 8 to 10 localities. So this is now also a good region which can be worked upon further. And this was that Hunzgi Bajwa area. This is the Kalabgi area. So coming up to now another project which I took up in 2022 from Bhandarkar Institute, that was of Infosys Foundation Fellowship. Now again, this Sina River was important to understand because it is a tributary of Bhima. This river was surveyed in 2010 by Professor Sabri and his students, and they could only report 3 artifacts from 3 localities. And the reason cited for this limited number of artifacts from 3 localities was that early hominins might have moved from this region and only they might have discarded a few artifacts here and there. And that's how we only find limited number of artifacts. So this was the understanding before I started this work, and I took up this work purposely for this to understand if that is really the case or we have missed something or there is some slight difference in this early hominin behavior reason cited earlier. So while surveying, I basically surveyed main Sina River along with that 2 tributaries of Sina, smaller tributaries, that is Kadi and Walumba. Now, Acheulian artifacts I could collect only from loose channel gravel context. So basic missing was that artifacts are there and they are found in secondary channel gravel context. So early hominin behavior and discarding of limited number of artifacts could not be the case. Only the artifacts have been transported to the secondary channel gravel context. That is the case. So what could be seen in this Sina Basin? Basically, the Sina River is a dry river bed. Most of the times it is dry. It flows only during monsoons and a few months after the monsoon. So from June starting onwards, June or June end, monsoon starts, and from then it like till September, October it rains, and after that 2-3 months till December or sometime there is water in this river. But more than 3 to 4 months, this river bed is basically dry. So at some points, the bedrock is also exposed. At some points, you have these gravels, and within these loose gravels, you have artifacts lying within these gravels. Now, you have to remember now these Maharashtra region or Upland Deccan region, particularly lots of developmental work, check bunds, dams, and water channel projects have been carried out. And also these river channel beds, which are full of these gravels, secondary or these coarser gravels, have been dug up for various purposes to retain water or to preserve water in these tanks. So you can see a small tank or some a natural tank would have been dug to preserve water. So what happens is this older gravel, which has by stratigraphy rule, it has to be there at the base. Now this older gravel, when it is dug, now it is lying on the surface because the stratigraphy reverses and they just dig the lower gravel and put it on the surface. Now, this gives us clue to understand artifacts which were buried, might have been buried in this lower gravel. Now they are coming up on the surface and we could find them on the surface. So again, at few sites only, we have a 1 or 2 meter section in this river valleys. Now this, I was saying, this gravel, basically this is the channel bed where this older gravel should have been there. But now they have dug this older channel and now it is on the surface. Now these old bigger cobbles and boulders are, and along with this some artifacts, Acheulian artifacts are lying on the surface because of this digging up art activity for various purposes. So this is the result why these areas, such areas which were earlier worked, have to be reinvestigated again to understand if there are some lower Paleolithic activities going on in this region. So this is just to show a glimpse of Acheulian artifacts collected from this Sina basin, upper Sina basin. Now this was a very small work of carrying out only in 2 to 4 months. So this was a very short project. So during this work also, I could collect more than 100 artifacts from this Sina river. So what is the basically context of these loose gravels are basically a mixture of older and younger gravels, a term which can be said as a reworked gravels from which Acheulian artifacts are coming out. Now, these are coming on the surface because lots of digging activity has been taking place in such rivers. So now 7 localities were surveyed, more than 100 artifacts, 101 artifacts were collected. Artifacts such as cleavers, knives, scrapers, flakes. Again, a large flake dominated assemblages are there, more than 10 centimeter flakes are there. Now, this confirms a wider early hominin occupation in this region, which was not suggested earlier. It was suggested that this sporadic occupation might have taken place. Now, this locally available compact vesicular basalt was basically used for making artifacts because that is the only source from which such large artifacts could be, large tools could be made. Majority of artifacts are highly abraded, while a few are moderately abraded. Different types of patina again and calcite incrustations were also observed on these artifacts. Again, a common phenomenon in this region. And geomorphic context, typotechnology of artifacts, all this suggests that typical Acheulian, large flake Acheulian artifacts are there, technology was used, and possibly this could be belonging to the Middle Pleistocene period. This again has given up a good evidence to understand this Acheulian activities in this region, has opened up new area to carry out further paleoenvironmental studies and, if possible, some chronological studies. And this again has the good potential to carry out. So general observations about not only this work, but broadly what is the presence of Acheulian culture in the Deccan Trap region, at least from late early Pleistocene or early Middle Pleistocene, is well known and well studied. And further works could confirm these dates again if some scientific studies could be carried out and some excavations could be carried out. Locally available raw materials were exploited, particularly that is varieties of basalt and dorite type were commonly exploited. In some cases, siliceous materials were also exploited. Giant and large cores basically have been observed near Morgaon, Chirkion Praura, and in recent studies in the Upper Krishna Basin in Urmodi and Baudan Nalas. Then unifacial large cutting tools are most common in Morgaon assemblages and also in latest assemblages found from this Upper Krishna Basin. So this could give an indication that this could be an early evidence of like early Acheulian. I'm not going to the chronology of these, but this could be suggesting technologically they are slightly earlier as compared to some artifacts assemblages such as Gangapur. Sites of Bori and Yedurwadi are quite unique with pointed tools such as hand axes and picks outnumbering cleavers, which is a rare scenario in this upland Deccan region because other sites have given more number of cleavers other than hand axes and picks. Small flakes also have been preserved in these both particular sites. So suggesting that these site preservation was slightly better at these sites where small flakes could be preserved and collected. So broadly, from the earlier studies and recent studies, mostly what we have learned is how to study the secondary context sites in this region, particularly in this upland Deccan or Deccan Trap region as such. What possibly was the original context of the artifacts? Now, we certainly know that these channel gravels or reworked gravels are a mixture of older and younger gravels. So this gravel is not the original context where occupation was there. Original occupation was slightly away from these river beds, but they were possibly on the bedrocks which were exposed during that time, during the Middle or early Pleistocene time period. and what is the nature of sites that can be expected in this region. Now, certainly these sites are of secondary in nature, but this is the most common context we will find in this region. So these kinds of surveys, further surveys in different river valleys where lots of developmental works have been are going on, can be again carried out. And that's why there is again need to reinvestigate these particularly secondary these channel sites in 21st century, because these developmental works are happening. These are actually happening for developmental works, but these are again also exposing older buried sites. So these are slightly helping as an archaeologist to understand more Paleolithic activity areas to study. And then these sites are certainly secondary in context, but they are yet significant to understand the Paleolithic scenario, lower Paleolithic scenario in this upland Deccan region. Although there are many other issues to be solved, such as paleoenvironmental studies, are lots to be expected. Lots of dating techniques have to be applied, and the secondary context sites again becomes a problem to understand this chronology. But on the basis of typological studies, technological studies, and some geomorphic studies, we can certainly do or carry out some works to develop the Paleolithic scenario in this region. So I'll end here. I'll basically dedicate this presentation to two stalwarts who have worked in this region and their guru, Professor Sankalia. But these were the gurus from when which I have learned basically, and my teachers have also learned. That is Professor Rajguru and Professor Dr. R.S. Pappu. Both were great stalwarts from Deccan College, and they have worked a lot in this Deccan Upland region. And we basically lost both of them in last couple of years. So I dedicate this work to these two stalwarts, and I hope that me, along with some other people, could carry out their legacy in this region. And this quest of understanding the past continues in this region. So thank you. I also acknowledge all the funding agencies, particularly UGC, for providing JRF during my PhD work. Then Infosys Foundation through Bhandarkar Oriental Studies Institute for that Infosys Foundation grant, and all my teachers, colleagues, and also Palaehome for inviting me to do this talk. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jayendra, for such a fantastic work.
Yeah,
Great.
so beautiful.
Yeah,
So
and now
beautiful.
the
A lot
session
of,
is open
yeah.
for all Q&A session. So if anybody wants, they can raise their hand. I guess Razika already have some questions. So we can start with Razika and we will wait for others to come up with their
Yeah,
questions.
please.
Yeah.
My
Go ahead,
first
Razika.
question. My first question, if there is in this big area, okay. First, thank you so much for this presentation. So beautiful material. Okay, I love it. I love all the bifaces, indexes, and how to say also for the clevers. Just one question: if there is in any way or any place in this big area some Oldowan artifacts, lithic artifacts. This is the first. And for the second, I don't know, I saw in one slide, okay, I think it's related to Buri site, one bone fragment. And please, if you can just, how to say it, tell me more about this fragment of bone fragments.
Yeah, so about
Thank
this
you.
older one, as such, we don't have any evidence, particularly in this region. So we only have this Acheulian technology, which is the earliest technology in this region. So there is no older one. Even the Acheulian sites, we rarely have any chopping tools, particularly in this Upper Krishna basin. So we don't have any older one as such, or pre-Acheulian we certainly don't have at present. If some evidence comes up in coming up future studies, that might change the scenario. But at present, we don't have any older one as such, or older one like artifacts also in this area. At this Pori, which we saw that bone, basically that was a calculated elephant tusk, elephant tusk. So that has been reported in 1980s. And now there is again some question about this. It is elephant tusk, certainly. It has not been dated. So that is a problem with that. But it is the elephant tusk. Along with this tusk, there have been collected like Acheulian artifacts made of basalt and dolerite type. Now, the thing is that these tusk and Acheulian artifacts, are they of same time period? We don't know that. At present, we are saying that they basically are of same time period. but it is quite possible that they might have been of different time periods and they have been cemented in this gravel at some point. So that work can be studied again also. But now these artifacts have been also collected, tusk has also been collected. So now it is difficult to say on that basis from if they were from two different contexts and now cemented at one point, or they were of same point of time. So that is a problem. But Elephas tusk was reported from that from 1980s only, and then again 2018 or 19 again this was published.
Thank you so much for the answer. If someone question.
Anyone else would like to ask or discuss some points with Jayendra, then they can just raise their hand and we can unmute you. I have one question, Jayendra. You said from Bori and some other sites you have some Acheulian artifacts on dolorite, right? Yeah. So, do we have any dolorite source nearby area, or what is the source for the dolorite there?
At even near Bori, about 1 or 1.5 kilometers, we have dolorite exposures, dike running through near this point of Bori, and Chirki, near Chirki, there is already dike exposure which has been well reported by Corvinus. So it is not both of them actually have been studied previously. It is not my work as such, but both the sources have been fairly well published, documented, even by Geological Survey of India in their maps. They have mapped these dike sources in this region. So dike was fairly exposed or common, even now slightly moving out from Acheulian. One site, which is a Middle Paleolithic site, which has been reported, a site called Ranjani, which is near Bori. So now this Ranjani has been reported as Middle Paleolithic, has artifacts made on dolorite dike. So in Acheulian also there was dolorite dike, in Middle Paleolithic also certainly dolorite dike was exploited. But this Ranjani, only one site should not be there. So there must have been more sites which have been not reported or overlooked or could not be found. So lots of Middle Paleolithic issue is there if there is continuity. Particularly, that's what I mean to say, that in this region where already Acheulian sites are reported, rarely we find Middle Paleolithic continuity, which is observed at well-dated Atirampakkam, Bhimbetka, and some other localities. So this region has to be looked differently. Acheulian is there where the Middle Paleolithic go. So it could not happen that certainly they jump from basalt to siliceous. So there has to be some continuity. Maybe we are missing some link or some pockets where some Middle Paleolithic on dolorite or basalt is there. This one Ranjani clue is there, and some in Tapi also is there.
Yes. Okay, we have one more question from Dipendu. Can open chat box and have a look at it.
Chat box. Yes, chat box.
Yeah.
So basically, Acheulian is common technology, so it's not something rare to be found. So all the Acheulian sites we have basically bifaces and axis cleavers. So stylistic similarities are there, and then some unique features are there, like unifacial artifacts are more in this Upper Krishna Basin as far as present study is concerned. So, and obviously this Upper Krishna Basin where I have worked, or this Upper Sina, no excavations have been carried out. So these are basically randomly sampled artifacts. So if some excavations are being carried out, then we can carry out more comparative studies as such. But at present, this is basically Acheulian technological artifacts. As a large flake Acheulian is common. And as I mentioned, chopping tools or as such, they are missing in this Upper Krishna Basin or even in the Sina. So that is one of the unique feature of these assemblages, which are present in other Acheulian assemblages, in some Acheulian cases. And then some analysis about the artifacts like cleavers, particularly in Gangapur, and their comparative studies on the basis of their secondary flaking, thickness and all, that has also been studied. So on that basis, that grounds also, I probably can say that this Upper Krishna Basin Acheulian could be slightly older than Gangapur on the basis of artifacts and their technology. So on the basis of previous work which have been carried out. So that could be the reason. That is the only answer. But they are quite similar. Not very much difference is there. They are quite similar to other Acheulian areas in South Asia.
Okay.
Only the raw material is basalt, which is the distinct thing.
Great. Any more points? Acha, okay. Jayendra is okay with the
Okay.
answers. Yeah. Razika, do you have any more questions? Or anyone else?
Just two
Yeah.
small questions for if we all this how to say it huge Acheulians. Okay, if you can tell us if we have from the early Acheulian to final or more evoluted Acheulian. If you have, we can speak about this classification. From the lower to the upper Acheulian or no in this area.
Yeah, because this kind of work actually not much has been done. But as I mentioned, that Gangapur, which has very thin cleavers, the thickness of these cleavers is
Exactly.
even rare, like chisel. Basically, they have been termed like chisel-like cleavers, which have been very fine. So technologically, probably they were quite advanced in technology. So earlier, this late Acheulian, early Acheulian terminologies were quite commonly used. But in present scenario in this upland Deccan region, we have to be quite careful while using these terminologies. So like Morgaon, looking at the artifacts, broadly looking at the assemblage, we probably can say
Okay.
this is early Acheulian technologically. Obviously, lots of work and analysis has to be carried out. But broadly looking at the assemblage, just at a glimpse, if you keep two assemblages together, Morgaon and Gangapur, you will certainly understand that this Morgaon certainly is quite older in technology. Dating, I'll not talk about it because Morgaon has lots of controversies regarding dates. But looking at the technology and even context, certainly it is older than Gangapur. Even in the Upper Krishna Basin, looking at the technology of the artifacts and how they have been made and limited secondary flaking, they are not crude but very
Yes.
simple in make. So that suggests that this is a very early, slightly early technology in this region, not as a broad South Asia, but in this region, Upland Deccan region, they could be earlier than this Gangapur or other sites. But Cherokee again has given evidence of early Acheulean as such.
Perfect.
If no more
I
questions, no
think
more. Yeah.
I
I think
think
then we will
no.
say, yeah.
No. I think no.
Okay, nothing. Hmm. Okay, then I would like to thank Jayendra for accepting our invitation for Paleo Home
Yeah.
is Here talk.
We are happy with the lot of lithics. Yeah, so beautiful.
Yes,
Thank you so much,
Thank
Jayendra.
you.
Thank you for
Thank you so
our
much.
auditors. Thank you, Akhilesh and Shanti. Okay. See you for in another
yes.
meeting
So
or
see you in
discussion.
next month. Yeah, see you in next
Yeah,
month with interesting and more is like with more ECR works, and we will discuss more things maybe in next month. See you all
thank
in
you.
next
Thank
Paleo
you
Home
and
talk.
happy Diwali to all
Thank
of you.
you.
Yeah.
Wish you a happy
Ciao.
Diwali.
Happy holidays. Ciao.
Yes.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.